Look around you. Look up here. Take time to make time. Make time to be there. Dan Greider, it's Sunday night, October 9, 2022. Probable cause, I did make time to be there, and I was there. I just got back from visiting Richard Floyd McCoy's children. That is D.B. Cooper. If you saw D.B. Cooper, Deep Family Secrets Part 1, I am working on Part 2. I've got the Richard Floyd McCoy interview. I'll play that in just a second. Before I do, I want to tell you that this is going to kind of be a long video. I appreciate you joining us in the chat room. These weekly videos are only up for a few days, and then they get taken down. This one will definitely only be up for a few days because I'm sure I'm going to catch some grief over this. I did a Zoom call with Jason Miller, a YouTuber. He's a CFI in California. Due to the Watsonville mid-air plane crash, the two airplanes that crashed and everybody died in Watsonville August 18th of this year, I came across a video done by SoCal Monkey and Jason Miller, and they published this, and I have some serious problems with it. I want to know your opinion, but I did a Zoom call. My intent was not to bust his chops over this. I really thought that we could have an intelligent conversation and come to a logical conclusion. There are some things really wrong with this, and I'm going to use this video to point out to Jason because he's still, even at the end of this call, and you're going to see it, he still will not relent on what the proper thing is here. We're not going to fix this unless we take the time to call out these things that occur. So I'm going to play that video. It's going to take a few minutes. That's a Zoom call with Jason Miller. It's coming up. Before I do that, here is the interview with Richard Floyd McCoy. Richard Floyd McCoy did two hijackings. I know the D.B. Cooper one you're familiar with, November 24, 1971. Immediately after that, in the spring of 1972, there was a second one, a copycat one that was absolutely identical, and you've never heard of that. The second one was done in April of 72. The only difference was that the hijacker made some vast improvements over the things that were done wrong in the November 24, 1971 hijacking. The guy that did both of them was Richard Floyd McCoy. Let's cut to the interview right now from this morning. This is my interview. I spent a lot of time with the D.B. Cooper children. He has two kids, and I'm on a first-name basis with both of them. I have done a lot of traveling. This is going to be D.B. Cooper Part 2, and let's cut to this video right now. I want to show you my very short interview this morning with Richard Floyd McCoy. Coffee, cheers.
Cheers.
I'm sitting here with Richard Floyd McCoy III. Who was your dad?
My dad was Jay Johnson, a.k.a. D.B. Cooper, also known as Richard Floyd McCoy Jr.
Yeah, so we just had a crazy weekend, and it's been a crazy last 6 months, hasn't it?
It's been a pretty crazy journey, been a crazy life.
But I feel really satisfied with what we got, and the thing that has really turned the corner now is some new information and new tangible evidence never before seen by the world that we have. How solid do you feel about what we found?
Well, you know, we've talked before. I mean, this has always been my truth, but yeah, the rest of the world's gonna see something that, I mean, it's 100%. It's a slam dunk.
Yeah, and it's never been seen. So
no.
The odds of us finding what we found and the tangible stuff that we have now.
Yeah, I would have never thought in my life that I'd be in the same room with some of this stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing. But it was a great weekend. We had a great weekend here with you and all the people and stuff like that. So I'm looking forward to putting together D.B. Cooper, Deep Family Secrets Part 2, which I hope to put out, and it's going to be a long one. It's going to be a long video, but this clearly is going to finish telling the story on exactly who your dad was. And as you know, my work is not monetized. I don't sell advertising. My goal in all this is to tell the world who your dad was. And I know he was a hijacker, but this isn't a hijacking story. To me, this is a love story. And I've told you that from the first time I ever talked to you. Your dad was a special guy, and he made some mistakes, but he was also backed into a very difficult corner, and I think he did what he had to do at the time. But that's the story I want to tell on who your dad was, who your dad really was.
Yeah, that's the story I want told. You know?
That's the story that needs to be told here. People look at this and say he was a criminal and a hijacker, and well, yeah, doing 2 hijackings was definitely wrong, definitely illegal. But when you look at what America did to your father and the grudge that he did have, I can empathize with him.
Yeah, a different time, as they say, but yeah, it was. Yeah, my dad was, gave his all, and he was not getting anything in return, I'd say. So.
Right. So I'm going to put this thing together, and I just want to say thanks for all your hospitality. This is my 10th trip up here to crash at your house.
I haven't kept count, but probably.
So it's always great to be with you kids and travel, and we got a lot of stuff done. So
yeah, this is going to be amazing. And thank you.
Yeah, you betcha. All right, well, that's it for this one. That's your teaser. D.B. Cooper, Deep Family Secrets, Part 2. It's coming up. So the other interesting thing was, while we were all together over the weekend, some guys from a podcast, Grimerica, is going to air a podcast, I think, in the next 48 hours, probably on Tuesday sometime. If you want to go to the podcast Grimerica and check out their recording, we did some audio recording as a teaser for DB Cooper Part 2, and they're in on the whole thing here, and they're going to do, there's several major networks and major podcasters that are going to cover the story after my DB Cooper Part 2 video comes out. So we're working on that, and you're going to see it, but check out their podcast, Grimerica, and here's a screen grab of it to show you where to go to look for that. You can watch for it probably in the next 48 hours, and I'll be looking forward as well. Now let's cut to this Jason Miller thing. I did not call Jason Miller to set him up for failure. I called him to set him up to let's talk through this thing and come to the right conclusion. Jason's main problem is that he referenced an advisory circular claiming who had the right of way. And Jason, you have to remember, it doesn't really matter who has the right of way if you're both dead. Don't be right, but you can be right, but don't be dead right. This airport traffic pattern thing, the straight in versus the base. I want you to listen to Jason's argument for what he did. He stated these advisory circulars in this video as his justification for what he did. What he didn't tell you was that there's an actual FAR that says that the lower aircraft actually has the right of way. Jason was much higher than the Cirrus. The Cirrus was on straight on. Jason was in a 210 turning downwind to base, coming in very close, very tight, and very high by his own admission. He was high to low. He used this rule. It says, but you can't use this rule in order to cut in front of somebody. You can't use the rule to get lower immediately so that you can sneak in front of somebody. That's the way the rule is written. This is an actual FAR. It specifically tells you what you can't do. Let's go take a look at the actual video footage right here of what he did, and then we're going to look at the Zoom call with Jason and I. Here's the video footage of the scene as it played out.
McClellan traffic, Centurion 731 Hotel Romeo is approximately 7 miles to the northeast. We'll be crossing midfield at pattern altitude for left traffic, runway 34 McClellan. I got 2 wheels, you have 2 wheels?
Yep, got 2 wheels.
We got pattern altitude, we got the airport in sight.
McClellan traffic, there's 5 miles to the southeast, inbound for 3-4, straight in traffic permitting. McClellan.
Oh, Mr. Straight in Cirrus, I don't think it's such a great idea.
Nah, he's probably not gonna do that. Alright, below 160, flaps will go 10.
Flaps are 10 here.
Traffic, 5 mile final, 3-4.
Over the fence. Straight in traffic from McClellan. We're not sure how this is going to work out. 731 Hotel Romeo's left downwind, runway 34, McClellan.
Traffic, 3 mile final, 3-4, McClellan.
But, come on, buddy. Yeah, he's like coming screaming.
Yeah. McClellan traffic, Centurion 731 Hotel Romeo's left base, 34, McClellan.
Traffic, there's no short final, looking for traffic.
Got him off your right.
Yeah, I see him behind us.
McClellan traffic, Centurion 731 Hotel Romeo, short final 34, McClellan.
Traffic, see you turned in front of me, I'll slow down.
Okay, let's talk about the situation. We're arriving at a non-towered airport from opposite the traffic pattern side. The FAA recommends crossing midfield and entering the traffic pattern in one of 2 ways. One is at pattern altitude plus 500 feet, then 2 miles clear of the downwind descend to pattern altitude, and enter 45 to the downwind, yielding the traffic already in the pattern. The second is cross midfield at pattern altitude and turn 45 degrees into the downwind, yielding to other traffic in the pattern. This one works best when there are no other planes in the pattern. The FAA encourages using the standard traffic pattern when arriving or departing. It suggests pilots on a VFR straight-in approach maneuver to land so as not to disrupt the flow of other aircraft. The recent fatal mid-air collision at Watsonville is a good example of why straight-in VFR approaches are a bad idea. Expecting everyone to get out of your way or alter their standard traffic pattern is contrary to the FAA guidance on traffic pattern flow. It also puts the pilots flying at pattern altitude in greater risk, since extending downwind usually means flying out of gliding range of the runway. In our case, while we did have the straight-in airplane in sight, and although we technically did have the right of way, turning base in front of the straight-in aircraft may have increased the risk.
So you can see from this, they've already set up a cockpit of animosity. It's us against them, us against the Cirrus pilot, and they want to cite all these advisory circulars for justifying what they did. But your obligation in the traffic pattern, a non-controlled airport, a straight-in is perfectly legal. I don't know if you like them or don't like them, but a straight-in is acceptable by the FAA. We have to all get along and not hit each other with our airplanes is the bottom line. Don't set up an air of animosity over the frequency. Work it out with the other guy. Talk to him and offer to extend or offer to buy him a cup of coffee. Do whatever you got to do so that you don't hit. Jason Miller turned his 210 in front of this aircraft without ever having seen him. He turned base and then he turned base to final. Finally, at the last second, Eric saw him at his 5 o'clock position once he had turned base to final. I disagree totally with that. Let's take a look at the Zoom call that sets that up. It's going to take a few minutes, but let's just go ahead and step through that. In the studio today with Jason Miller, the finer points, and brother, I appreciate you joining me on this Zoom call. I'm not very good at these, but thanks for jumping in here. We got a few things to talk about.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Dan. It's always nice to talk to you. Well, mostly nice to talk to you.
Depends. Well, the reason that I set this up, I initiated this, is because all the controversy and several mid-airs. It's a big deal. You're a CFI, you run your aviation channel, and I saw this video where you're flying and you're with Eric, the guy from SoCal Flying Monkey. You're in a 210, you're in the left seat and you're flying. The video actually got posted on Eric's YouTube channel, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's correct.
But you guys kind of collaborated on that and put it out there. Tell me about the reason for it. It had a little bit of controversy in there, so tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, this happened back when we got back from Oshkosh, so in late July. We were coming back into McClellan. We were over the top of the airport, and there was a Cirrus reported 5 miles out on a straight-in approach. So there was some. I think his first call was on 5 miles out, straight in. Planning straight in, traffic permitting was his first call. So, and there we were over the top of the field. So it was unclear, should we turn tight and short, or should we go long and look for this guy? Anyway, that's the controversy, and I'm sure that's what we'll get into. But I did want to point out that this happened a month before the Watsonville midair. You remember that? I think it was a 340 that ran over the 152. Right. So I know Eric posted this. He posted this video that we're about to talk about. Almost to kind of bring up that conversation again, like he knew it was going to be controversial, and he pinged me and said, "Hey, dude, do you mind if I post this?" And I'm not trying to hide anything. The reason I didn't put it on my channel is because I wouldn't teach it the way I flew it, but I also don't mind saying, "Hey, that's what I did. Let's talk about it," because all of this is in the spirit of trying to get to more education, trying to get to a place where we all know what to do and everything's a little bit safer,
And that's my point too. That's the reason I initiated this. I took a look at it. I read the comments. I looked at the tape. So tell me, you're coming in there, you're in a 210, your left seat in the 210. Tell me your first awareness that there's another airplane even in the area. When did that occur?
Now keep in mind, Dan, that this is end of July. I do a lot of flying, and right. I didn't edit it. It's all Eric. So I've only seen the rough cut. So what I'm telling you here is from memory. Right. But what I remember is being over the top. Like I was going to do a midfield downwind entry where we cross from the dead side at pattern altitude, turn directly into the downwind. We had stage cooled the engine down from altitude. So I was over the top of the airport, entering the downwind at midfield, and I heard the Cirrus call 5 miles out.
Right.
At that point in my mind, I just decided to go power to idle and do a tight, short approach. And I think I kept it super tight because I didn't have him in sight. So I think I was like a .3 nautical mile base. I mean, I was like, I just turned really tight. But to be fair, I
You're,
wouldn't teach it. I
you were
wouldn't teach
coming,
it that way, but
you
I
were coming
fly
from high
like
to
that.
low, right? You were coming from high to low and tight. You went power idle, you were high to low, and you were in really tight. You were up high and kept a high tight base.
I don't know about high. We crossed the runway at pattern altitude, so we're at pattern altitude, and then from there, power to idle, maneuver to land. Yeah.
Yeah, you lost 1,000 feet someplace between downwind and touchdown. So that's high to low, and I mean, it's just a short approach, which is fine. So
Yeah.
exactly. Now tell me about the two sides of this thing. What have you seen? What have you seen on the yaysayers and the naysayers?
Well, that was the thing about the controversy. Like, so when Eric showed me the thumbnail, so the way it went was Eric's like, "Hey, do you mind if I include that thing that happened because of this Watsonville crash? I want to bring some light to it." And I think I said to Eric, like, "I don't mind you showing it. I'm just, like, I wouldn't want the whole video to be about it." But anyway, his thumbnail was, "So you turned in front of me," right? So it set the stage for the controversy. So some people think I cut this guy off, right? That the turn that I made actually was unsafe or could have potentially caused a collision if I didn't see him, or he would have to fly so slow he'd have to go around or something, right? That's what it seemed like in the
Right,
video.
right.
And that's the conversation we want to have. But that's not really what happened. I mean, when our wheels hit the runway, he was a mile and a half out. We were in our parking spot before he even exited the runway. And like I think I told you earlier, when I listen to it now and I hear him say, "Oh, you turned in front of me, I'm just going to power back and slow down," I start thinking, well, maybe he was going that fast because he thought he was doing us a favor, trying to fit into the pattern, like trying to get in front of us, and it wasn't expecting me to do a short approach. But the thing about doing those long straight ins, this is what I said to him on the radio. I was like, well, dude, it's kind of hard to know what you're doing if you're not flying a pattern. Is I don't ever remember hearing that second call 2.5 miles out. I don't ever remember seeing him visually. What I remember was when I was ready, when I was at the beam position over the top of the runway looking at the numbers, he's 5 miles out. And that's, so I thought plenty of space. I'll just go power to idle, crank it in tight, and I'll be in my parking spot before he leaves the runway. So that's really what happened.
Is this the first time you imagine that an altercation has ever occurred at an airport over who's going to be first? You think you're the first time that this has happened?
I can tell you, Dan, it's not. It's not the first time it's happened to me.
Exactly.
Right.
So it's a problem. Let's step back and take a look at the beginning baby steps and what could have happened here. Off the video, I wrote down in my notes here. Eric says, "Mr. Straight and Serious, I don't think it's such a great idea." And you replied, "Nah, he's probably not going to do that." So automatically, you guys are aware of it, but it almost sets up an air of me versus him. Okay, and when he calls him Mr. Cirrus, it almost feels like, all right, let's see what you got, Mr. Cirrus. Did you pick up on that?
No, I didn't, but I can tell you the reason I said he's probably not going to do that is because his call said straight in traffic permitting. And I assumed that once he realized there was other airplanes in the pattern, that he was going to not continue to do what he was doing. Right? That's why he said traffic permitting.
Yeah, and then the next thing you said is straight in traffic for McClellan. We're not sure how this is going to work out. So when you said that, you were still in doubt. How is this going to work out?
Yeah, I wasn't sure. He's right because he was coming in real fast. He's 5 miles out.
Okay, and since you guys are the only two guys on the radio, at what point did you actually talk to the guy and say, what can we work out here or anything like that? Would that have been a better thing to do?
I think that's a great idea, Dan. I really do. I personally believe that the spacing in this case was so extreme that it wasn't even necessary. Like I'm telling you, we were in our parking spot before he left the run. Like there wasn't a spacing issue.
Right. Well,
I mean, if there were one, like if it were as close as the YouTube video makes it seem, like certainly that's a great idea. And for the record, I wouldn't have turned in front of him if I perceived there to be a collision hazard. And the thing I'm not proud about on this is that I wouldn't, like I said, I wouldn't teach it this way. I wouldn't put this on my channel. I don't want student pilots thinking you're supposed to do tight, short approaches in front of an aircraft on a 3-mile final. Like, I don't want people thinking that. But at the end of the day, was this was this even close? Like, I mean, it's not even close.
It wasn't
There is
close.
there's
It
no
wasn't
confusion. We
close,
were,
but it was unknown. And Eric says, "Come on, buddy," and then he says, "He's coming screaming." Now, when he said he's coming screaming, you did not have a visual on this guy. You did not.
no,
You did
I
not.
didn't.
Now, you put yourself in harm's way turning towards that is the Watsonville scenario. You intentionally turned towards the unknown without having a visual. And I know you referenced right-of-way rules and the FARs and who's got the right-of-way, and all that's good information, but it also says the lower aircraft has the right-of-way, and he was definitely much lower than you. True?
I don't know. Did you find his ADSB track? We couldn't
I
find
did.
it.
I did. You flew a really high, tight pattern. I mean, you were in close, and he was well beneath you. So
And I just think, Dan, the spacing, like, let me just throw this at you because, like, I think the spacing was so large here. Like, let me give you an example. Let's say you're holding short. No. Let's say you're holding short for takeoff, and tower tells you you're clear for takeoff. You have traffic on a 2-mile final. Do you personally need to have that traffic in sight before you roll? Are you not going to go if you don't have him in sight? He's 2 miles out. You're going to wait there until you see him?
I'm going to wait till I see him. And especially in this case, you're the pilot flying, you're the pilot in command. You ask your pilot on the right side as you're on left base, got him off your right. You ask him if you do. You're already aimed at the traffic and you still don't have a visual on him, and you know he's coming screaming in. I didn't see.
I think you were tricked by the video, Dan. I think you're reaching. I think if you really look at the spacing, come on. You know that, like, he's 5 miles out. You wouldn't turn base. You'd continue your downwind. Let me ask you this: what if because I believe that pilot was assuming he had the runway and was using whatever tools he could to kind of sneak in front of us. What if he said he's 10 miles out and he was lower?
You still have
you would fly 15 miles out and get behind him? Or what if he's 20 miles out, straight in, short final, 20 miles out?
I think the lesson and the takeaway here is that you're confusing who's right and who wins versus who's dead. Yes,
I'm telling you, there was no issue. I think you were tricked by the video. I think there's absolutely no spacing issue.
As it turned out, there was no issue, but you didn't know that. You could not be assured that because you did not know. You could not have known. You didn't know where he was. You had no idea where he was, and you still.
Well, he reported 5 miles out, so
well,
I knew that. That's what I knew, is that he's not even in the airspace yet, and I'm over the runway.
You've replicated.
He's not even.
You've replicated the Watson accident. You had the opportunity to talk to the guy and to be less adversarial. You didn't work it out, and you turned towards him. He had the right of way, and you turned in front of him. And as you can tell, I'm kind of on the other side of the fence on this. I think this is a very poor example that needs explaining on your part. I think you made a mistake here. I think you made a very big mistake.
And where do you perceive the hazard? You keep saying I turned toward him, but you're not acknowledging he's miles away from me. If I had a traffic scope with a 2-mile ring, Dan, he wouldn't have even been on.
But
so tell me how I turned toward him.
I did have a traffic scope. You didn't have him in sight. You didn't know. Your guy hadn't seen him. It was an unknown. You're flying an airplane towards an airplane, and you have no idea where he is. Turns out it was safe, but you didn't know that. That's the lesson I'm trying to get across. You like flying. You could have done a few minutes extra flying and guaranteed your safety. Instead, you've set up an adversarial environment where I'm going to win. I'm going to beat this guy. Okay, Mr. Cirrus, I'm going to cut in front of you, and there's nothing you can do about it because I have the right of way. And I disagree with that mindset, Jason. I'm very disappointed in the outcome of this.
I mean, and look, Dan, if I'm going to be like super, honest with myself, and I'd throw you a bone here, I'll take what you're saying. Like, I think probably specifically saying on the radio, I'm turning and going first would have definitely been a good thing to do. But like I said, in the reality of the situation, and based on what this pilot was saying, I'm 5 miles out straight in, which is it's not even in the airspace of a Class Delta airport while I'm over the runway. I thought to myself immediately, there's two acceptable safe choices here. Either I turn tight and land right now, or I extend. I don't have this guy in sight. He says he's 5 miles out. I'm just going to turn tight and land, partially because he said he's going to come straight in, traffic permitting. So I assumed that once he realized there was aircraft in the traffic pattern, that he would do the right thing and fly a normal traffic pattern.
Do you know what assuming does?
Yeah, I mean, that's maybe not the best way to go, but I don't think that I was ever in a dangerous, or put him in a dangerous situation.
You didn't.
I think
You didn't know.
no.
You had no idea. You trusted blind luck, and you concluded the video by saying we technically did have the right of way. Turning base in front of the straight-in aircraft may have increased the risk. Those are your words. You increased your own risk, and you were aware of it. And I'm at a loss to figure out why Jason Miller would do that and put a video out that shows that. What?
Well,
What?
to Dan, for the 10th time, I didn't put the video out. That's not my video, my friend. I did not put that video out.
It's you, Jason. You're the pilot in command. You're flying the airplane. It's you. You made the decisions. You did it. This is Jason Miller, and I want you to know I'm the kind of guy that's going to call you out on this. I'm very disappointed. As you can tell, I'm crazy disappointed in this.
Yeah, I know. And I think, Dan, I think you're just a little far from the flight line these days, maybe in the office too long. I think that you were tricked by the YouTube video. I think if you look at the reality of the situation, there was no risk. And if you want to look for positive learning takeaways, let's take the one that you brought here. Let's get constructive. It would have been a better idea to be more explicit, of course, about who's going first and who's going second. But because there was no risk if I turned right away, just as there was no risk if I extended past him, I chose the first thing. The Cirrus pilot never had to go around. Dan, that's proof in the pudding that there was plenty of space. We were in our parking place when he pulled into the parking ramp, and I saw the guy. We said hello to each other. There was no issue. He wasn't upset or anything like that. We brought this video forward as a slight controversial moment in light of the Watsonville thing to have this conversation here so that we could give people better ways to do this in the future. And like I said, I feel like a little bit of a martyr because everyone thinks like you that I created a dangerous situation or that I cut him off. The reality of it is we're trying to show what would happen if, like when you're out there, think twice about maybe doing a long straight in. So beyond your disappointment with me, what constructive points do you have for everyone else going forward?
You had the opportunity to enter a conversation with the man on the radio and work something out. You had the opportunity to be less adversarial and less aggressive, calling him names between you. Okay, Mr. Cirrus, that sets up an air of that's a bad. We should be more friendly in the traffic pattern, work things out, offer to
Agreed.
Offer to buy the guy a cup of coffee, whatever you need to do, but don't hit the guy.
So you got one good idea. Be more explicit about who goes first. What are your other ideas about how to, for everyone else, being safe going forward?
Honor the FARs in a Cessna 210, closing the throttle and flying a high, tight left downwind, left base, and assuming that you have the right of way is illegal and it's wrong, and that you have sent the wrong message to other people that watch Jason Miller fly. Don't do that. Do not do that.
All right. And that's it. This is about me. You don't have anything general for everyone else, like learning takeaways. I mean, the whole point of putting this controversial experience out there, Dan, is not so that you can call me and say you're disappointed with me, but so that we could have a conversation about what to do in the future.
I've just told you what to do.
Well, no, not me, but how do you feel about long straight ins? Are you like, how do you think that's an acceptable way to fly when people are in the pattern?
It's an absolutely acceptable way to fly. We do practice instrument approaches. The acceptable thing, all those things in the advisory circulars and the FARs, it uses the word should. There's only a few FARs that are set in stone. Those are guidance. They should do this, but you can do a straight in. You just have to work it out. And I'm asking you to be less adversarial.
Well, Dan, I got that. No, you made that point like 4 or 5 times now, and that's okay. I'll consider that. And like I said, I don't think this was one of those situations. I mean, the guy and I saw each other and just said a friendly hello. There was no spacing issue. But you're right. It's not good to be adversarial, and people should be explicit about who's going first and who's going second, especially if it really matters. But to your point about instrument approaches, Dan, if there's a tower operating and there's aircraft in the pattern, they actually don't let you continue that instrument approach.
That's
So
what
I don't think it's easy. I don't think it's like buttoned up just because you say, hey, it's perfectly fine to do straight ins. We do instrument approaches. Like the guy doing the 340 that ran over the 152 was doing a long straight in. What do you make of that Watsonville crash?
I can't prevent people from doing straight ins. All I can do is give you the best policies and practices for making
Well,
them.
you got this right, but you've got this bullhorn, you've got probable cause here, you've got this channel. What do you say to people about long straight ins? You think they're just fine? That's just a fine way.
If you work it out, it's just fine.
And that's not presenting any risk. So what if there's 3 planes in the pattern?
Well, you're going to have to work it out. A long straight in may not be possible, but I'm going to offer to break off my approach or go get a cup of coffee or go to a different airport because I'm going to talk to the guy and let him know that everything's fine. I'm going to do a practice approach. And if spacing doesn't work out and we don't like it, I want to see you. I want you to see me, but we have to work this out. And what you did, Jason, in my opinion, I'm going to go out on a ledge here. You're on the very ragged edge of careless and reckless for FAR violation. Your flying was on the edge of careless and reckless. Period.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, I really don't see it that way, Dan. He wasn't even within 2 miles of my aircraft. I don't understand how that's careless and reckless.
You didn't know.
Based on his report, I knew. I mean, so that's the other thing, like in terms of like constructive learning takeaways. The one that you've mentioned a number of times, like being more explicit, right? Like who literally, are you going first? Or am I going first, right? That would be a good thing for folks to do in the traffic pattern. But the other thing was, shoot, I just lost what it was.
Jason, I'm sorry, buddy.
I don't know.
I'm sorry to call you out, and I know this is important.
Well, that's fine, Dan. I mean, you can call me out. Like I got thick skin, and I wouldn't have taken this phone call with you if I couldn't handle it. But
exactly.
I think that you're trying to get on me for something that at the end of the day in reality is not that big of a deal. And what we were trying to do is put that moment out there so that we could have a bigger conversation about how to fit in the straight in approaches. Like
it is a big deal. You about had another midair out there and you don't even know.
Oh my God, you're out of your mind, bro. This guy didn't even get within 2 miles of my aircraft. How is that a midair?
You didn't know. You had no idea where it was. You're turning base.
Listen, we were on the radio talking, so that I can't, you're so funny, bro. Like you're not even focused on what if there was an aircraft in the pattern. Let's say the Cirrus is coming, without a radio in the pattern, without a radio in front of me. What if that guy existed and the Cirrus is coming in at 140 knots on a long straight in? You're totally fine with that. But you're not fine with me turning a 0.3 nautical mile base in front of an aircraft 2 miles out?
No, because you didn't see him. You had no idea. You're asking Eric where he is and if he saw him while you're doing a high, close, tight, descending left base, asking your right seater if he saw him after you've already turned base to final.
All right, listen. All right, well, I fly tight, power off approaches as a matter of course. When I'm by myself, that's the way I fly. Every approach I do is power to idle, and I glide around. So I'm very comfortable with that, even though in the video I balloon the landing. I am very comfortable with that type of maneuver. When the guy says he's 5 miles out and I choose to do a tight, short landing that has me in my parking place before he leaves the runway, I think you are coming out of left field to say I almost had a midair.
You never saw it?
Way out of left field.
We don't know if it's close.
To be honest, Dan, it's hard to see an airplane as far away as he was. Can you spot airplanes almost 3 miles away? He was so far away from me, it would have been hard to see him.
I'm not going to turn until I see him. I'm going to get him visually before I turn in, and that's the difference between us, Jason. And I want you to read the comments on this video.
No, I get it, because, and fair enough, like I said, I wouldn't teach it this way. So I understand by the way the video was edited and the fact that, people don't normally see me flying tight, high bases like that it seemed like it was a big deal.
You're in a heavy G10. You can't do that. You can't fly like that. And you certainly, as an industry,
I can't fly like that. I fight that all the time. I flew like that. I just landed, Dan. I'm sitting in an airplane, and I flew like that on every single pattern.
Well, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do that. That's
you wouldn't fly tight power off bases. You wouldn't fly power off. I'll tell you what. Out here in Nevada County, I don't want to go down in the pine trees. I stay in a position where I can glide to the runway at all times. Right. That's the way I fly.
That you need to be maneuvering predictable, and non-radical movements in the traffic pattern. Nobody's expecting you to fly like that in the traffic pattern. Fly a stabilized approach, fly a normal traffic pattern. That's what I would expect out of Jason Miller.
Well, if a normal traffic pattern to you, Dan, is 1,700 RPM and 2.5 miles from the runway, that's just not the way I teach it. I teach by default power off approaches so that my students can glide to the runway and get familiar with the gliding characteristics of the airplane. Anyway,
I think you're pretty far out
you
there.
made your point. I think you made your point, right? You're real disappointed in me. You think that I almost had a midair. You think I was careless and reckless, and you've got no issue with straight in approaches. That's those are your points, right?
I can't correct people's straight in approaches. Those have happened since the dawn of time, and they're going to continue to happen. All I can do is give people.
Well, that's why we're having this conversation, Dan. So like, this is your opportunity to talk through the real specifics about that kind of stuff. Like if you're flying straight in approaches and there are aircraft in the pattern without radios, what about them? And what if your call?
There's nothing.
I know it's not illegal. I'm saying, is it dangerous? And what if your call is? What if your call is, I'm going to come straight in, traffic permitting? What is the Piper Cub, who's just listening to you on his little handheld, strapped to his pole? He's not going to continue doing what he's doing? You just told him you're going to fit in, traffic permitting. So that Cub is just going to keep flying the pattern. This is the conversation that we wanted to have. And like I said, I feel a bit like a martyr in the sense that I know we made it look like it was really tight. In reality, it wasn't that tight.
You got two eyeballs in your head and you did not use them. You didn't use your eyeballs and your brain, and that's the only thing that's going to prevent a midair. You didn't use your eyes, your brain, and you let macho get ahead of you. You were determined to be first, and you were. And I don't like any of it, Jason. I don't like any of it.
All right, Dan. The point is taken.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Have a good day.
Yeah, no worries. All right, you too. Bye.
So I want you to know that last week we had 5 general aviation fatal accidents. The week before, we still had 2 more that we didn't get in. I'm going to talk about those in a second. But before I do, I want to show you my new bag of tricks here. I got more hats. The DTSB hats are here. I'm going to have a way to put those up and make them available. But we've got these AQP certified stickers here that are now available as well. And I'm going to start including some of these. So these stickers, you can put them on your airplane or on your flight kit or whatever like that. AQP certified. Isn't that cool? We also have some DMMS strips, neon orange, so you can just peel them back and stick them on your airspeed indicator and learn what the min speed to fly is. It's what they do in the airlines. Don't stall your airplane. And we're going to look at this accident data here in just a few minutes. Don't stall the airplane. Got a couple other future stories coming up. Here's a guy out in Seattle someplace. Made a lie about his history, and this entire fascinating story with him, Jayla, and the whole thing here. I'm going to dig in deep and show you the entire story on this here pretty soon. It's not good, but watch for this coming up, and I'll tell you exactly who the guy is and what the whole problem is here on this story, and you're not going to believe it. Let's jump in and look at the fatal accident data for last week. First of all, the 2 accidents prior to this Sunday night's closing here was October 1 and October 2. November 262 Tango Alpha, that's the Cessna 172 in Minnesota. This was AQP number 3. This is intentional IMC after takeoff. He was an instrument instructor. They had to have the airplane back to the flight school by 8 a.m. the next morning. A pilot and 2 passengers killed. They made a takeoff. They rotated right up into the clouds, and this airplane came down. I couldn't tell you if maybe they had a vacuum failure. It was a steam gauge airplane. Maybe something else mechanical happened, or maybe they simply got distracted and disoriented. In any case, they drove that thing straight into the roof of that house. They did not stall. They did not spin. That airplane came down with a tremendous amount of forward speed. It hit the top of that roof, and everybody died on that. I'm not exactly positive yet, but this looks like intentional IMC after takeoff, where he got busy, got distracted, and did not realize that the airplane was descending as fast as it was. The next one on October 2, November 892 Sierra Papa. This is a petrol out in Montana. This guy, Rick Stapleton, AQP number 5, he hit a power line. He's the only guy on board. He's flying low. I found the power line. I found the place. He's flying formation, flying very low like those guys like to do, and he hit a power line. He's dead. Now, for this week, starting last Sunday night all the way through this Sunday night, there's only 5 of them. October 4, we had 887 Quebec Romeo. This is one of those little Mustang kits out in California. The guy's name was Craig Cornford. He was 45 years old, and I am sorry to say that this is definitely a suicide. Craig had all kinds of problems going on, including a terminal illness and a host of other problems that he could not deal with. He took his airplane out. I listened to the ATC tape. His friends have called me and told me that's not what Craig normally sounds like, and he knew what he had to do. He took his airplane out and he flew it into the side of the mountain, and that's all that happened on this one. A very sad case, and I'm very sorry for the friends and family of Craig and that tragic loss, and I know what Craig must have been up against in those final moments. A terrible place for a human being to be. Just remember, if you are in that place, try to get help. There's some 800 numbers, and there's some people that you can talk to. Reach out to someone, ask for some help. Taking your own life is not a good idea, and I don't recommend that. And try to get help. Try to ask for somebody. If you're somebody out there that can listen and look for those signs in another pilot or another individual that does need a helping hand, and be nice to somebody, that's what I would recommend. Let's take a look at the next one. November 902 Alpha Tango. This is the Alpha 836 up in Maine. This is definitely a DOMS stall. They were IMC. Eldon Morrison was one of the pilots. I'm not sure who had which seat, but he was 81. They had another guy in there who was also a pilot, but they will definitely get this thing slow on the approach. This thing definitely stalled and hit, and it burned. Both of them are dead. I'm not sure who was in what seat, but this is AQP number 12 caused this one. The next one on the 5th of October, November 217 Charlie. This is Cessna 185 up in Alaska. This is a drowning. This is Gerald Stansel. He was 75 years old. I'm not sure. This thing was taxiing and went to make a takeoff, aborted his takeoff. But the float plane ended up flipping over, and he drowned before he could get out, before he could swim out. Gerald drowned. He's 75 years old, and we're very sorry to hear about that. The next one, 46 Papa Delta. This is an M22. It's kind of a kit plane. I'm not real familiar with it, up in New York. This is definitely a structural failure in flight. Lots of these M22s have had pieces fall off or wings fall off. They don't have a great record. The guy's name is Kent Furing, 57 years old. He died from AQP number 17, and he lost an actual wing in flight, and here's where that airplane ended up, right here in the water, and it was not good. The last one, October 6th, just a few days ago. This is November 97883, a Cessna 172 in Virginia. This is a lockup. This is a brand new female flight instructor. She only weighed about 110 pounds, and she was brand new. She was flying with a very large African-American man who was over here on a green card visa study program. He was a African national of some kind, going to school over here, doing an intro flight. There was his friend in the back seat, and the actual person in the left seat was supposed to be getting an intro fam flight of some kind. Viktoria, as a CFI, went out to give them this flight, and I went to this location. This is Williamsburg, Virginia. I just got back from there. I was at the scene. I'm going to show you this video footage next. Here's us walking up to the building. This is Rick's Aviation, where the 172 is based. This is where Viktoria worked. She was only 23. This is a lockup on a FAM flight, advisory flight. This is how you lose control of an airplane. If you allow your unknown passenger to touch the controls during takeoff and landing, they absolutely can freak out. And this guy was 10 times more powerful than Viktoria. And this is how it happened. Let's take a look at this video footage from on scene. This is from on the ramp at Williamsburg, Virginia, just a day or so ago. That's Rick Aviation, and this is facility that launched the 172. So we're going to step outside and look across the fence here, but the airplane was based here and never came back. So let's step outside and look across the fence here. They're still picking up the wreckage here today. Saturday, October 8, we're at Williamsburg International Airport. Right back here, this is where this Cessna 172 crashed just a few days ago. Had 3 people on board. The CFI Viktoria Youngman was in the left, or she was in the right seat giving instruction, and I think the guy in the left seat was very much bigger and more powerful. This is a lockup fatal. This student on takeoff pulled back and held it back, and there was nothing that she could do about it. We don't have any cockpit audio to confirm that, but the flight path and the profile off of runway 2 and the witness accounts that I've heard, this was not an engine failure. This airplane pulled skyward and it stalled, and there's no other way to make this airplane do that except a very aggressive new student in the left seat who is scared. This is a lockup, and this phenomena can occur. You CFIs out there need to be very careful who you're flying with and who you allow to have the controls during takeoff. until they become acclimated to the act of taking off or landing, because a student will pull aggressively in the time of crisis. I believe that's exactly what happened here. NTSB and FAA are still behind me, picking up the wreckage here today on Saturday. Our deepest respects and condolences to these families. It's a horrible loss, a beautiful young woman who lost her life in this flight instruction accident. This falls into the category of lockup. So that's all we got for this week. I'm sorry for this being such a long video, but I tried to cram it all in there. 5 fatals this week, all of them pretty much preventable. We got to do a much better job out there. I'm wanting to tell you, AQP DMMS, the entire program is for free. I'll leave the description a link to the AQP program. You can read about it. I encourage you to read and study. This is an education thing. These aren't mechanical failures that are killing our pilots. This is a lack of education is all this is. Fly with plenty of speed in the traffic pattern. Fly and know what your min maneuvering speed is, and don't go below that. That's a 30% buffer. When you're on final, fly the traffic pattern at VREF. Know the signs for stabilized approach. If you don't have a stabilized approach, go around. If you have to go around, know how to do a go around. Don't mess up your go around. When you go around, fly the proper speed and clean up properly. Learn to fly your aircraft just like the airliners do. If you're going to the airlines, you're going to have to do that anyway. Plan for an engine failure on takeoff every single time. Plan for a rejected takeoff on every single takeoff. If it doesn't happen, that's all good. Plan for it. Think about it. This is not hard. All you have to do is learn about this. I know I'm awful fired up about this, but I'm so tired of seeing 6 and 7 general aviation fatal accidents per week, every 7 days. I take down the previous video because I got another fresh 5, 6, or 7 to tell you about. It's horrible, and we're not doing any better. Let's try to pass the word out there. AQP for general aviation. I didn't think of it. I'm not selling it to you. I don't have anything to push on you. I just want you to stay alive out there. I'm going to get Dylan in here. We're going to drop a real quick guitar song and put this thing in here. I hope, if we have time, and get this thing up and on the air. I've been traveling a lot. I got more traveling to do. I got the DPE conference on Tuesday night out in Phoenix. So I'll be out there. Phoenix, the FSANA schedule out there. I'll put that on the screen here for you. The DPE symposium. I'm going out there to talk to some DPEs Tuesday night out there in Phoenix, Arizona. For my tiny little itty bitty fledgling YouTube channel, I sure appreciate you guys being with us and joining us here in the chat room, and we'll look for you every Sunday night. We're going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to have a fresh set of 5, 6, or 7 fatals next Sunday night for you. I know for sure. For my tiny little itty bitty fledgling YouTube channel, Dan Ryder. Probable cause.